Hello, this is National Chess Master Rats continuing my series on our team match with between my video lessons group and CARPE DIEM, and my video lessons group is off to a pretty good start, something like 31 to 12. Uh, these early results are coming from players that are moving too quickly. These two games were actually finished a few days ago. Here, White commits an opening blunder. Bishop c4 is just going to cost him a tempo to d5, and now the bishop has to move. But you know, it's the Caro-Kann. The game is going to basically stay pretty level. Uh, you know, you play fast. I make quicker videos. I'm not going to go into great detail other than offer a few pointers here and there. I think the pin is correct. Bishop with bishop g4. It's the best square for the bishop. It'll tie White down a little bit. And here White makes a tall pawn out of his bishop, trying to keep d4 safe and secure so he doesn't have to accept doubled pawns on bishop takes f3. Anyway, Black just continues his development. And now here, I think Black made a mistake. The best move is just put the bishop back on h5, maintain the pin. There's no use taking this knight, destroying your pin, and improving the position of this knight. Where's this knight going next on d2? Look at the board. Well, it's not going to c4. It's not going to, e4 and c4. It's not going to b3. There's a rook on f1. Where's it going to go? Back to b1? Just let it sit. Okay? Bishop h5, good move. Okay? Bishop takes f3, not a good move. It comes from playing too fast. Okay? Now suddenly this knight has some mobility, and Black's a little weaker on the light squares. Now this move will lead to White accepting an isolated queen pawn, which could provide his undoing, but it's tricky. We'll talk about that as it comes about. Okay, so now Black realizes he needs to get a blockade on d5. And one thing about having an isolated queen pawn, usually have some free mobility for your pieces. White does have some space now, but Black again has a very solid position. There's not a single weakness in his position. Now White takes a pin, Black stops that, and White's got about as active game as he can get, but he's still stuck with that isolated queen pawn. Okay, Black develops his queen, and Black puts more pressure on the d5 square, trying to control it. And here I think putting the bishop back here doesn't make too much sense. What's White hoping to do? Do a discovery? Well, Black just blockades it. Phooey. And I think Black has the better game here. And here White inexplicably takes the knight, getting rid of his advantage of having a light squared bishop, which Black didn't. Now, like I say, this bishop is just a tall pawn. This is a weak pawn. The best White can hope for is a draw, or a Black blunder. Okay, and Black continues to put pressure on the d4 square. Look at that. Every piece that Black owns, all 5 of them are trained on that d4 square. 2 rooks, a knight, a bishop, and a queen. And every piece that White owns is tied down to defending it. How do you improve your position? Well, you try to make some exchanges that will make that isolated pawn weaker. The more pieces that come off the board, the weaker it becomes. Okay, so there we got rid of one set of rooks, but the rook's not the best blockader of an isolated pawn. The knight is, and it's going to take 4 moves to get to d5. The knight's got to go to c6, b4. The rook has to move, then it can come back. You might even have to move the queen out of there just to avoid a discovery with d5. So it's going to take several moves to get the. Let me just back up. There we go. It's going to take several moves to get that knight to d5, but Black still has no weaknesses. He's in control here. Okay. Now here I think Black commits a little mistake. He should play g6. Now this creates a weakness on e6 that Black's going to now have to start watching. Okay, so here comes a check. That's a natural move. And now suddenly black's going to have to stop and defend this. I'm not sure white's best path. He plays knight f3, but where's that knight going next? You know, whenever you move maneuvering knights, think about where they can go. D3 might have been an interesting place to put it, simply because it can go to f4 next, and pressure that rook and pressure that pawn a little further. And maybe white has the upper hand here, so black has committed that mistake I mentioned that would get white back in the game. But white comes back to f3, obviously probably from moving too fast. Now white weakens his pawn structure further on the king's side. I don't think this is good. F4, F3 are now weak. Definitely black wants to get this knight back to D5. That should be the plan of action. Okay, bishop B5, offering a queen trade. This too will help. You know, as pieces get liquidated, black's position improves. Now maybe, let's see, I just noticed something. Maybe white has a move D5. This is kind of interesting. The objective is to rid himself of this passed pawn. I mean this isolated pawn. White gets a passed pawn. Let's see, but white can play a trick of his own. Now, in return for giving black a central passed pawn, white has relinquished his weakness and now has an outside pawn majority. So, and white in turn can eventually blockade this pawn. And maybe the tables have turned ever so slightly and white's got an even game. But we're going to have to assume that since he didn't play it was because he moved too quick. Well, he didn't play that. Okay, he played rook c2, threatening a mate. But that just brings the knight back into play. And well, I guess he could still do d5, couldn't he? Let's see. Rook at d5. Okay, how do you want to take? Rook or pawn? Let's try with the pawn. Now, bishop takes. No, we can't do it. The knight comes and covers c8. Okay, it's good to check these things. That's how you improve your chess. Analyze. If something doesn't work, you switch to the next line. Okay, so rook c2 I think is an inaccuracy on white's part. Now knight c6. Knight doesn't play d5. He plays rook c4. And black side centralizes king. White weakens his pawn structure a little further. Now, I don't know if you should be putting a pawn on a dark square unless you're trying to keep the bishop here and redeploy this knight. That could be the plan here. Knight a5, knight e7, knight d5. Okay, now white creates another weakness, but maybe he's going to try to blockade it. Now b3 is a weakness where it wasn't before. Okay, so obviously black's trying to redeploy to d5. That clears the f5 square for the knight. Although, once again, everything white owns is defending d4. He just ignores it and centralizes the king. Now, where's that king going? Trying to, I don't know if trying to take on f6 and march the king to h6, maybe? Okay, how do you meet wing play? Play in the center. So black just occupies d5. Here comes the king. Now the king goes back. I guess he decided there was nothing there. Okay. Now the king goes back again, so black's just kind of biding time. And black just happily offers to make trades. And I think the game is getting closer to even now. If black had a shot here, he needs to liquidate this bishop and try his luck with a bishop versus knight ending. But one of the drawbacks is that black has put this pawn on a dark square. That just makes it more likely that white's going to erect a blockade. We'll take a quick look at this in a second. Okay. You could still try it, but king goes back, king e4. And here the game was agreed drawn. But let's try this move. Let's just play it for the fun of it. Now, how should white take? If he takes with the pawn, he gets rid of his isolated pawn. This pawn on b3 secures c4 and a4. The knight on d3 is covering b4. So right now, black doesn't have an entry point for his king. The only way to make an entry point is to zugzwang white, so he has to move that knight. Can it be done? Well, let's find out. Okay, this probably needs to be played eventually. Now, if white moves his knight, king b4 comes in, and let's see, knight c1, king b4, king d3. Let's look at it. Just make sure. Okay, king d3. Now that stops king a3. But then suddenly black gets a little tempo over here. Put the pawn on a white square. Try to penetrate with the king. Maybe we're getting somewhere. Bishop f2. And let's see. If king d3, king b2. Now the knight's loose. If king d2, you run into bishop takes e3 check, and white can resign. So let's see. So white can't play knight c1. So that leaves white to play king moves. Okay. They always move his h-pawn, but let's try king f3. Now, I don't know how black can improve his position, and who knows, maybe white can even it could get risky trying to win that pawn on e6. But how does black improve his position? Not quite sure. You can play h5, but then maybe knight f4 could come in, and white could get some counterplay with an outside pass pawn. This might be good enough for a draw because you see white doesn't have, or black doesn't have entry points. So it goes back to when he played a5. Let's look at the position there. It was better off to leave this pawn here. How about if we put the bishop on? Let's just put the bishop on a5. Okay. The purpose here is we want to redeploy it to attack that pawn at some point. Okay. And white was beginning to wiggle waggle with his king if he hadn't already done it. I hadn't already done it. So let's try and centralize the king and just see what happens. Okay. Now, if we play knight d5, we allow a check, which may or may not be a nuisance. Let's just make sure it's not a nuisance. Okay, and I'm going to put this on a white square just for safety's sake. Now I'm getting knight d5 in. Let's see. Black can play this for win. I'm not sure theoretically he can, but he can sure try. It's white's move. White just going to wiggle waggle a little bit here and see what black intends. Okay, let's get the rooks off, and let's see if there's any difference. Uh-oh, bishop's loose. Let's see, we can cover that. And I'm avoiding playing this weakening move. So wiggle waggle with the king again. Now there's some fundamental differences now. Black is not tied down to the pawn on a5 with his bishop. White's done well getting most of his pawns to light squares, but not quite sure how the king penetrates. B5 takes a square away from the king. Knight c4. We're going to try and get the king to a5 now. Okay, let's bring the king over here. Okay, so we got the king to a5 for what it's worth. And knight d3. Let's see. Bishop a3. Now White's kind of running out of moves here. If he moves the knight, let's see, knight f2, you get bishop b4 check, followed by bishop e1. Let's look at that. Okay, now I think king, well, let's see, king e2, bishop takes, king takes. I think black's got king position here and should be okay. If you save the knight, knight e4 restricts the bishop somewhat. The black king is starting to penetrate. This can get dangerous. Get very dangerous. You know, black's definitely got winning chances here. I'm just going to examine this and call it a game. Okay. E4. The point is, if white goes pawn hunting, or black goes pawn hunting, white goes pawn promoting. This might be enough to hold unless white gets put into Zugzwang. Let's see. A5. King e3. Maybe some triangulation will make a difference. I think it's wrong to take because it gives up c4. But then if you... Let's see. King here. Pawn takes, pawn takes. I'm trying to keep c4 under control. King takes, d5. White's queening first. So black to play. Black has the tempo move a3 or h6 rather. Looks like white can play king c2 and hold. So might still be a draw, but interesting game. I'm going to move on to the next one that they played. This one went very quick. Okay, reset. Load the game. Flip the board. Oh, didn't flip it. There we go. Okay. So we have the English opening, and again, moving too quick is the culprit here. Black sees this d3 square and wants to occupy it, but it tactically is unsound because white attacks and defends at the same time. Can you solve it? Pause the video. Okay, I've resumed. The way to attack and defend it at the same time is to push the pawn to d4, and all of a sudden black's in trouble here. His bishop is going to get trapped, and now after a3, if the knight moves, here comes b4, and you lost a piece for 2 pawns. But black tries this. White just grabs the knight. White's a piece up with a winning game, and the rest is routine, and there's not really too much to this game. There's one point I want to make here in a little bit. Wait, was it zigzagging back and forth? There, it's played it. Okay, black plays his wishing zug here, check. And it's interesting. I don't like white's next move, and there's a reason for it, but because white played that move, it makes him win the game even quicker. When your opponent has a pawn running down your throat like this, treat it like your own pawn. Just play king h1, okay? Use this pawn as if it's one of yours. Well, it's not one of yours. You don't control g1, but it could be unsafe to take it because it could expose your king to a lot of pressure. You can win the pawn later when you get more material off the board. It's not going anywhere, okay? It's good not to take, but by taking, black immediately throws his queen away. Check. So what can I say? But normally you can't expect black to do that. Probably if anything, black should try is this. That seems to be the natural move. Now the black king's in a little bit of trouble here because of the open file. But, you know, white's ahead 2 pieces here. Let's see, black can grab this knight and stay a piece down. Let's see. What do we want to do? Do we want to check? Now, one problem with checking is it opens up f2 for the white or for the black queen. Although we can always interpose, you know. But, you know, white's a piece ahead here. He's going to win this. But I think it was wrong to bring the king up. But inexplicably, black doesn't pay attention to the board and overlooks that his queen is on the loose, and the rest really requires no comment. So, moving along, white can happily give up the queen and still remain ample material up. He gets his queen back, and I don't know why black's playing on, but it ended. Anyway, good games at EttoreMajorana. Thanks for being part of the team. Take care.